Welcome to the Well Seasoned Librarian Podcast. This is Season 9, Episode 16. I'm the podcast host, Dean Jones, and I'm very happy to be talking with you today. Hope you're all having a really great year so far, and you're safe and happy. Today I'm getting to talk to Maggie Zhu, who is a food writer, and she has a really wonderful blog I'll be telling you about, and a brand new cookbook. And I was pleased as punch to talk to her because I really loved her cookbook, and I was happy to get introduced to her because of it, and I'm just so over the moon getting a chance to talk to her. If you're not familiar with Maggie, she's a New York-based blogger, writer, recipe developer, and photographer. She grew up with a mother who always did the cooking, and her culinary adventures started in 2007 when she moved to Japan and needed to cook to survive. Learning and sharing Chinese food had become a way for her to connect with her roots and the rest of the world. Her mission is to help more people get to know real Chinese food and expose less known regional cuisines, such as Northern and Xinjiang food, to a broader audience. More importantly, she wants to show you how easy it is to cook with wholesome ingredients and create delicious dishes that are like the ones served in Chinese restaurants. We're going to have links to her website, Omnivores Cookbook, and her brand new cookbook, Chinese Homestyle, which you're going to love. So I really want to add, and this will be something I'll be saying in the interview. I really liked the cookbook a lot. Now, the title doesn't say it, but it's a vegetarian cookbook, and it's full of just amazing vegetarian recipes. I wanted to cook more vegetarian meatless meals during the week to kind of make the family more healthy and reduce our carbon footprint. So this was right up my alley because I think that, it's one thing to want to cook vegetarian meals, but another one to make good ones that the family's going to eat. And that was the biggest challenge I was facing. And I was trying all kinds of things like, garden burgers, etc., but that kind of old. So Maggie's cookbook came into view, and I was able to start trying some things from it. And let me tell you, the family liked it. They were very happy with all the recipes I've tried from the cookbook, and I don't think it really even became a thing where we were thinking about it as vegetarian. It was just really good Chinese food. And the other thing I like about Maggie's cookbook is that it's really simple. She has really good, easy to use directions, and she doesn't make it very challenging. She makes it easy for you. So I could go on all day about this because I really, really like the cookbook a lot, and I'll be gushing a lot in the interview too. So instead of that, I'm just going to go right to it. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Maggie Zhu, author of Chinese Homestyle. Welcome to the Well Seasoned Librarian Podcast. I'm your host, Dean Jones. Today, I'm very proud to be talking to food writer Maggie Zhu. Maggie is the author of the award-winning food blog Omnivores Cookbook. She has a new cookbook out, Chinese Homestyle, everyday plant-based recipes for takeout, dim sum noodles, and more. Maggie, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, it's such a pleasure to be here.
I wanted to start with the question about where you grew up. You grew up in Beijing, China. Did your love of food begin there growing up?
I think I always enjoyed food, but it was more of how to say, it's just everything you do. Like every day you have to eat. I don't think I was particularly like obsessed with like trying out different food because back in the old days when I was growing up, the food we eat at home was very, very simple. And at the time, there weren't that many restaurants in Beijing. And I mean, I do, as a family, we went out maybe once every month or maybe later on once per week. But when I was growing up, like especially with the time when I was little, I was like just eating really simple homemade food. I think my like interest in food grow like more like during the later stage of life when I was started traveling, and then when there's like more and more like regional Chinese cuisine that come to Beijing.
You eventually ended up living, after a few other places, you ended up living in Austin, Texas in 2015. What did you think of Austin when I've lived in Texas and I have relatives that are from near Austin, and it can be, Texas is a very different place. What did you think of it when you first started living there? Did you have any culture shock?
I think I would, yeah, I think there were quite a few things that I thought, this is actually really different because I came from Beijing. It's like pretty crowded and busy. And at the time, my husband actually told me, it's like, oh, we're moving to a nice little city. And I was imagining a city like Beijing. And I think it's like, oh, this is actually really quiet. I
Yeah.
enjoyed it. Yeah, it was a different concept for the city, I guess. And the other thing, actually, it's not really about Texas. It's more about in general, in the US. I was surprised at, what I can get from supermarket, like grocery stores and how people cook and eat. I think I just thought it's very, very different. And then it made me realize that, oh, some of the recipes I shared on my website probably won't work because people cannot find the stuff.
Now, I wanted to ask when did the urge to write about food come to you? At what point did you start writing about food and realize that you really enjoy doing it?
That is when after I studied in Japan, I lived in Japan for 2 years for my graduate school, and then I went back to China. And at the time, I was doing a pretty boring job at the bank, and I thought I want some sort of like creative outlet because I always enjoyed creativity related work growing up. That was the time I started writing my food blog, and I really enjoyed taking the photos and exploring the recipes and share my experience and the recipes with my readers.
Food blog, Omnivores Cookbook, 10 years ago in 2013. By 2016, it had become a full-time job for you. What did you envision for the blog in the beginning when you started it?
I guess I didn't really think too much about it. I kind of jumped into it because I thought it's really, really fun. And I did it as a part-time thing for quite a few years when I was doing having my full-time job. It was a great how to say weekend project for me because I work on that every day after work and on the weekend. And I thought maybe it would be really cool, if it gets more popular and maybe even I could, earn a little bit income from it. But I guess I didn't really have like a plan at the very beginning.
You wrote in a recent article that you felt a little bit burnt out by it. And I don't think the people that are listening probably know all that's involved in writing a blog. Like there's a lot of work that goes into it. What kind of work do you have to do to kind of keep your blog running from week to week?
There's quite a bit. On the daily basis, there's the content creation part, which takes up the majority of the time. And
Yeah.
on top of that, there's like the admin, the tech, like once in a while, I have to redesign the website and I always try to make it more user friendly. And you're always constantly working on increasing the speed, a lot of stuff like that. And there's a marketing part where, after you create a piece of content, you have to promote it. So how, what you can do to make more people to able to see the content. Like I write my weekly newsletters. I schedule out content on all the social media like Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, and all that. And then there is the part of net like networking. I talk to my peers. I talk to other bloggers. Sometimes we meet ups and go to conference together and like learn new things and exchange information. And then there is the part of I have to constantly like learn by going to conference, webinar, like reading and go to workshops, like kind of like keep up with like what's happening right now because technology constantly change and the trend and the industry constantly change. So I kind of also have to, and also of course like the part of like the writing and the photography and everything that like I always want to spend some time to learn. And I actually want to go back to content creation part. So that is the part I feel like I had no idea what it entails at the beginning when I started blogging because um, when the blog start to evolve to a bigger platform and I have more readers, the content creation is really like it takes so much time because you want it to look professional. I think sometimes people like imagine it's like, oh, I have this dish in mind, or it's like, oh, this is one of my favorite thing. I want to cook it for dinner, and I take a picture and just post it. It's actually completely, it's very, very different from that. experience. That I can say that maybe at the beginning of the blogging, like when I just started, it was what I did. It's like I think of something, I just cook it and post it. But these days, when it's become, I'd say now um, I have to spend a lot of time to do research of what I want to post about because there are like millions of topics and there are like so many recipes. But I need to figure out what my readers want and how I can cater this content to them, in a way that resonates. So I think that is a part that like sometimes I feel a little bit burned out by that because um, maybe I have ideas that I want to share, but maybe I will make an admin decision that like now is not the best time to share this because this type of food is most people don't know what is that. So I have to do a lot of research actually about what's popular, what people actually want, and I learn to how to make that content. And then and during the content creation, there's a lot of like recipe testings. I have to do it multiple times, and then I schedule the shoot. I have a very small team. Right now, I have one assistant. I have to schedule, what is a good time, set up the studio, the lighting, and everything. And when I'm cooking, I was also shooting videos, and then photos at the end. So it's like a process. And I think that is a part that is the most time draining and it's the most important.
You wrote an article about a trip you took in 2017 to Indonesia that was an influencer trip. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because it seemed to be a big game changer for you as far as how you created your content and how you do what you do.
I think that trip was really, really fun because I got to meet um, people from like they're from so many different fields. Because I didn't set any expectation. I thought I was going a trip with like food bloggers and we just talk about food. But turns out they actually did this gathering from like they pick people from all over the world. There are like people who does YouTube. There are travel bloggers. There are fashion bloggers, and there are people talk about like lifestyle and all that stuff. And it was interesting to really see those people from different kind of like industry, how they present the same topic, but from a totally different perspective. Like literally, we're going to a restaurant or going to a cafe or just doing those events. Um, but we shoot it or we take different pictures and we talk about things in a very different way. And I feel like that kind of opened my mind of learning from really different people. And I think that's changed. Like I feel like I become like more open-minded after that trip.
Your blog won the 2019 Saviour Award for Most Inspired Weeknight Dinners and was a finalist in Best Photography, which I'm going to circle back to later when we talk about your book. How did you feel after 6 years of hard work?
It was actually unexpected. It's funny because I feel like at the beginning when I just started, I didn't know what's out there. So I'd say the first 3 years when I was blogging, I actually applied Saveur award myself. I was like, oh, I hope I can win this. Of course, I like none of that worked. And then I just like the more I blog, the more I feel like, man, there are so many good content. Like there are so many bloggers that I admire, and they have like such great works. I didn't even bother to apply. But then I went over. It was really funny. But yeah, it's like the more I work on this, the more I feel like there's just so many good content out there, and they kind of like encourage me to improve more.
This episode is sponsored by Culinary Historians of Northern California, a Bay Area educational group dedicated to the study of food, drink, and culture in human history. To learn more about this organization and their work, please visit their website at www.chnorcal.org. talk about the topic of your blog, because your blog Omnivores Cookbook really talks in depth with really great recipes on Chinese cuisine. Now, I've talked to guests in the past who've combated the notion that there is a cumulative type of food, like when many people go to a Chinese restaurant, it doesn't say what region it's from. Most of the time, it's just like says Chinese food. And then I've talked to authors who spoke about Indian cuisine, where there's all kinds of different Indian cuisine all over India, but usually it's like an Indian restaurant. It's kind of homogenous, and they're battling that right now. Do you feel there's a lot of misconceptions about what is called Chinese cuisine, and do you battle that in your writing?
A little bit, yes. I think it comes down to what type of Chinese restaurant do you go to? I feel like if you're talking about like very generic, I'd say, like which you can find like any part of the US. You go somewhere, even like a remote place, there's like a Chinese takeout. And you go
Yeah,
in and they have a like very generic name, and the menu all look the same. They have exactly like the chow mein, the kung pao chicken,
yeah,
they're and the with everything with the brown sauce and some soup.
yeah.
It's like very, very, very similar. That is the I think that is something new that I learned after I lived in the US, and I think that's kind of interesting. Which I actually goes way back to the, early immigrants and how they developed this whole industry. But what I want to talk about is that um, in China, we have a lot of regional food, which
Yeah.
is totally different from like what you usually find in those type of restaurants. I feel like if you live in a really big city, like I'd say New York or LA, you can find very interesting um, and modern Chinese regional cuisine. But outside of those big cities, it's kind of like hard to find those restaurants because there's like maybe not enough people who appreciate the food. So where I from, we have like it's like in China, it's like very, very different. The food is like so different because for example, for me, I grew up eating northern style Chinese food, which is something that is kind of hard to find in the US. Even in New
Yeah.
York, I think there is like maybe one or two. There is one northern place I really like, but it's hard to find like everything I've eaten growing up. And a lot of food that people think is like very popular, like Cantonese food, is what's the most popular in the US, like dim sum, like chow
Yeah.
mein, like chow fan, those rice noodles and those little dumplings. I didn't really had them until really later on of my life, like high school and later, and they are just so different. And then there's a Sichuan food, like all the spice. It's getting very popular these days. It's getting more and more popular even outside of the major city. I didn't had Sichuan food until like maybe when I start working. It's just so interesting because China is so big and there are like so many regional things that are just very different from each other. And then the other style of food is Yunnan food. I think it's gradually getting popular, but still, like there are so many restaurants like that in the U.S. Yunnan food is the part like south of China. It's like south of Canton area, and it's
Yeah.
bordering like a few countries like Vietnam and like I cannot remember exactly, but it's closer to Vietnam and Thailand and those like regions. And for example, they use really interesting flavor profile. Like they use like mint, they use a lot of basil, they use all kinds of local mushrooms, and they dry age their meat to make things like beef jerky, and they make their own cheese from buffalo. So that's what I'm talking about. It's like, depending on the region, like how people eat, it can be really, really different. And the food is really amazing.
Your cookbook, Chinese Homestyle, came out with great success in September. I was reading the Amazon reviews, and just it was just this line of love, love, love all the way through. I mean, it's very well received. I received a copy, and I was taken with the recipes and your writing style. I really I want to talk about your writing style a little bit because, like, on your blog and in your cookbook, you really seem to have a wonderful, engaging writing style that talks about the techniques, and you really seem to be a natural teacher. Was this something that you had to work at, or was your, or did you develop the writing over time, or did you just naturally start writing in this way?
I definitely developed it over time. I think I always had it as an intention because you might have read it that I actually learned how to cook Chinese food in when I was living in Japan by reading a
Hmm.
lot of Japanese cookbooks because they're really good at like being very thorough and break things
Yeah.
down and showing like preps and like cooking process in like very detailed pictures. So I always really liked that style because when I started learning Chinese cooking, it's actually pretty difficult. It's kind of challenging, and I don't think it's easy. It's never easy for me. So I wanted to make it very because I mean when you started to do it and when you like do it like many times you actually find it's like oh it's actually not that hard. But at the beginning, if you've never done this type of cooking before, it's very different from say American cooking or Italian cooking. The way of you prep and cook things they're very different. So I always wanted to be very thorough, I'd say, to break it down, like to walk people through it and make it approachable. But I do think like when I go back to, look at the recipe I posted many years ago, it's like, man, I have to update this because I do feel like my writing developed over time. Um, that there are so many detailed things like I feel like people cut things differently. People, prep things like, very different ways. So I always kind of go back and like try to make it more clear.
I really
Yeah.
appreciate it because, like, for instance, when I was making the black pepper mushrooms and peppers for the family, I read the article, I read the recipe, and I looked through it, and it just, you made it very linear so that I could just start from beginning to finish. I was able to do it like in a very brief amount of time, and it worked so well. And I don't think I've read other authors where I just don't feel like that was the case. Like they made it more kind of convoluted where I kind of felt like I wanted to give up before I even started. So it was really
Yeah.
helpful, especially with some of the more technical issues like the sauce preparation, the prep
Hmm.
cooking. You made it really easy. So I really appreciate that as somebody who wanted to tackle these things. And so many of the recipes you had in there, just I really ended up really loving them and making them for my family, and they really loved them. So it was really kind of gratifying. It made me feel really good. And I was so happy I got a copy of the cookbook because it just really is such an asset. But I also
Thank
want to
you.
talk
Yeah.
about, I think, yeah, and I want to talk about the fact that this is a vegetarian cookbook. It doesn't really say it in the title, but it's like a vegetarian cookbook that's very vegetable forward, which I love. And it's something that I've wanted in my life because I want to have more meatless like food. And I'm an omnivore though. I do eat meat, but like I really wanted to do more. Did you kind of was that your intent in creating this, like to kind of bring more vegetable or meat-free or plant-based cooking to people in America?
Yes, that was exactly the intention because I am not vegetarian. I just think the topic is really interesting to explore because I have more and more readers and friends around me. Maybe they're vegetarian, maybe they just want to eat more vegetables. I literally had people who ask me about like a book about on vegetables because sometimes even they look at vegetarian cookbooks. There are a lot of things like a vegetarian burger. And
Yeah,
my friend was telling me, when I want to eat vegetarian, I really just want like nice vegetables. Like I don't want like a mock, meat thing or like a sandwich or like a pasta that is like no, it's like very carb focused. I
yeah,
think people want to learn how to make delicious vegetables. So that was the intention.
yeah. I mean, because just God, you make green beans look good. I mean, you make everything stuff that
Thank
normally
you.
would people would pass over. You make them look really good. And I think I wonder though if like the success and how good it is the fact that you're not a vegetarian because I've read a lot of vegetarian cookbooks. It seems like it starts off with the whole meat is bad, blah blah blah, and
Mm,
you feel like you're being preached to, and they're trying to sell you something, and it's like I didn't feel that at all with yours. I felt like you're just like about the food. Was that like anything you thought of when you made the cookbook?
Yeah, because I'm not, again, I'm not a vegetarian. So I actually did like struggle a little bit. It was like, do I really, am I qualified to talk about these topics? But because there are so many great dishes, um, I think when I was working on the book, I really focused on the flavor. And like maybe like you said, because I eat all kinds of food, so I feel like, oh, I really want to recreate, like what's missing, or like, I tried my best to bring in all kinds of like aromatics and sauces to make it as flavorful as possible. So,
I remember I was doing research on you and I read the fact, and you talked about something so simple. You said that there was a dish I think your mother or a relative made that was just simple cabbage. I think it was braised in chili sauce and Sichuan peppercorn. And you said
mm,
it's just, I mean, it really wasn't complex at all, but it was really a really good dish. And I thought so many times I think we overdo it. Like we cook vegetables to death to the point of they're no longer their natural self.
mm.
Do you think we overthink vegetables in the West? We kind of kill them.
Yeah, a little bit, especially the boiled green beans. Like that's like I
Yeah.
can't. Yeah, that's just like not that good. Um, I think the thing I really want to introduce to people are the really simple dishes. I think those are overlooked because those are the things that we actually in China, that's the type of dish that my mom cooks every day. Because you can easily, cook like two stir fries in a few minutes because you just chop a few things and throw it in, quickly cook it to retain its texture, and then you use like aromatics and like this very simple sauce to season it and they accompany with your other things on the table. Um, usually we do eat at home. We eat a little bit like braised meat, or we eat some dumplings or noodles and stuff like that. But the really every day there's like maybe a simple salad, like a cucumber salad, and the potato salad, like in this book that those are all family recipes. And there's a 4 ingredient okra stir fry. These are the things that are just because it's just so easy to put together. And I still do those things like every day in my life. So,
I really want to talk about the food photography in this cookbook because it's so beautiful. Now, writing a cookbook is hard. There's a lot of work involved, as I'm sure you could talk about.
mm,
Was doing also the photography part of it difficult as well? Because these aren't just simple tossed off photographs. These are really detailed, staged photographs. And I felt they really highlighted the food because not everybody, wrote a lot of cookbooks over the last several years, and not everybody highlights their food in the best way to make you want to eat it. Sometimes it's pretty, but it doesn't make you hungry. Your photographs make you hungry. Was that like was there some art with that in there where because it's also beautiful. There's a lot of like little nice dishes and artistic highlights that you put in the photography as well. What was your thought going into the process and was it difficult to do the photography as well as write the cookbook?
thank you, first of all, it's such a good compliment because I did think at the time when I was shooting it, um, I didn't take too much time on the photo because there's just so much work to do. There's a writing, there's a recipe testing, and all that. I think I tried to really focus on the food instead of do a lot of props and the styling is like the napkins and all the small dishes or trying to make it how to say maybe food is a part of it but make the picture just like artistic. I think a part of me wanted to like you said make the food like the main star, and also a part of it is actually just like kind of like make the process a little bit faster. uh, that's actually, I guess it worked out really well because I later on I feel like, oh man, maybe something I could have done a little bit more, throw in some more props and make it like, the so each picture will be like different, like look very different. But I guess it worked because usually I spend after I make some dish, um, so my goal of photography is I want people to know how the dish should look like once they cook it. I,
Yeah.
I do not like maybe once in a while I undercook vegetable a little bit, just a tiny bit so they retain their color. But most
Yeah.
of the time, I really feel like I want to follow my recipe, and it should look like this. It shouldn't look like a very overly styled or artificially made to look good, but your dish will never look like that. So that is always the goal.
Was it a learning curve to learn about food photography, or had you been doing photography for a while?
Oh, I started learning when I started the blog. If you look at my first post, if you look at my first blog post, you still can see the first picture I ever took. It's a pasta dish. And it's like terrible. It's like all yellow, very, very wrong white balance, and the food is like blurry, and it was like horrible. Um, but yeah, I did learn it over the years. I read a lot of books. I went to seminars and workshops, and um, I learned from other photographers. I even did a trip actually to Cambodia once with a travel photographer. So I did spend a lot of energy on improving my photography skill.
What was it like holding the book in your hand for the first time after you were done? Because you had been doing writing for a long time, but it had always been online. This is the first time you've had a tangible physical book in your hands. How
Mhm.
was that for you?
It was pretty nice. It was nice, and I think it was like, oh, it actually look. I was very insecure about it. I was like,
Really?
oh my God, what if there's a typo? What if like I did the measurement wrong? Like so many like I was very, very insecure about my book. But when I hold it, I was like, oh, it actually looked pretty good. I was happy with it.
Yeah, I mean, right off the bat, the cover is good. It's a really, really excellent cover. The publisher did an amazing job. I mean, I really have to give credit to the
They did. The
artistic
design,
styling.
the designer, she did a great job. Like a color, like I think it's really like a clean design and the good colors and all the pictures. Like the layout is great. Yeah.
Who are some of the food writers that you admire, that you like to read, that you go back to again and again?
So I do follow a lot of writers who write about Chinese food. So some of my favorites are Fuchsia Dunlop and Carolyn Phillips. Carolyn Phillips, my favorite book is her Oh Under Heaven. So those are the two authors that I feel like they are they're not Chinese, but they did such a great work researching and by actually living in China and actually just do very very intensive research and like cook and talk to local people and experience the food and actually interview and see how people really cook, and their stuff are really really like true to the real authentic Chinese food. I feel like sometimes even my cooking is not like you know, stick to like how is like stick to the root, like how people actually do that in China. But I feel like their books are really, really well researched and very authentic. And I do like Kenji Lopez because I feel like if I have a question about cooking, I just always find answers in his book. And I love Otto Longi's book. It's just because they're just beautiful and
Yes,
big flavors. Yeah.
totally agree. So, as the last question, I want to ask you, what's next for you?
What's next for me? I don't know. I think that I will keep blogging. I think the next is just like keep doing work, keep improving it. And actually that's one of my favorite part of food blogging because it always brings you like unexpected projects. Because I feel like over the years I've met really interesting people. I got to go to places, I got to invited to events, and just sometimes I have people coming and just asking me to do a project together, and it's like I would never have imagined that, and it's exciting. So I'm very fully prepared to whatever that gonna comes in my way in the future. But meanwhile, I'll be focusing on the blog, yeah, and keep writing about the food.
Maggie, I want to thank you for being on the podcast, and my family wants to thank you for making my cooking a little bit better. So, thank you
Thanks.
for being here today.
Thank you for inviting me. It's
That was my interview with Maggie Zhu. We have links to her book, Chinese Homestyle, on the bio link that you're going to see on whatever social media music app you use. We also have links to her website, Omnivores Cookbook, which you're going to want to check out because it's amazing and very comprehensive. On Friday, we're going to have sourdough librarian Carl DeSchmidt on the podcast, and I had a really good time talking to Carl. He's just a really wonderful, amazing font of information, and he answered all my questions about sourdough and being a sourdough librarian. So check that out. You're going to really enjoy that one. I hope you're enjoying the podcast. If you do like it, please share it on social media, share it to a friend, spread the word. We always want new listeners. I hope you're all having a really great beginning to your week and be able to cook a lot of really great things, hopefully from some cookbooks from authors you've seen on the podcast. Until then, keep on cooking.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.